Hey guys, Jack here with Nils Fram's piece, Because This Must Be. We're going to do a breakdown of it now and unpick how it works from a compositional perspective, but it's also going to be useful for you if you want to learn how to play this piece. If you're interested in more tutorials like this in future, don't forget to subscribe and comment below for the kind of content that you're interested in. Let's dive in. So an analysis of a piece can almost be never-ending. You can go as deep as you want. And for me, teaching a YouTube tutorial, I don't necessarily know how experienced you are. So you'll have to forgive me if some of the things are either too simple for you or perhaps too complex. I'll try and do a good middle even ground to get you thinking about this piece. So we're in C minor and we start with a C minor chord, right? And one of the things you should always do when you're breaking down simple pieces like this is just reduce the chords all the time. So here, what we mean by reduce is like try and get it back to a simple root position chord as much as possible, okay? So we know we want to take this E flat and put it down by these other ones, and we've also got a C here, so we don't need this one, and what we end up with is this first chord is a C minor chord, right? And all Nils is doing is he's arpeggiating it in a more open voicing, which is slightly more cold than this one. This is slightly closer and warmer, perhaps. This is a bit kind of brighter and colder. And then he is putting this ostinato, this repeated rhythm. And that repeated rhythm goes throughout this piece. And actually, those two things, kind of arpeggiated chords with a repeated rhythm, is a very, very good lens to understand this piece through. So you can play this in two hands. So bottom, up, 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 like that. Or you could play it like this. And actually, just from learning this piece, I think probably it's better to do this. Even though the left hand seems to not be doing as much work anymore, it kind of works better, especially when you get the stuff down here, the kind of really low notes as well. So let's take a look at some of the next chords. So with this whole section, is very much a C minor chord feeling. And these other chords we kind of pass through are almost illusions. They're not really other chords. They are really just related to C minor until we get to this G major chord here. Let me explain what I mean by that. So we've got C minor. This kind of isn't a chord. You could say it is a chord, right? If we reduce it back down, what we've actually got is this. Not really. Again, you can argue about these things to the end of the earth, but I'm going to explain in this video that this is just a movement up of the C minor chord, right? We're keeping this note the same, to then arrive at another version of the C minor chord, okay? So I'm not going to actually give this chord a name here, but you may disagree with me and that's totally fine. So we've got C minor, interesting D minor-y type chord thing here, and then we get to this chord, okay? Now, the root of this chord is an E flat major chord. Sorry, the root of this chord is E flat, so you would be forgiven for thinking that this is an E flat major chord, right? But I don't know about that. If you listen, that's not the sound that he's going for there. It's actually much colder and much more related to C minor, right? So the lack of that B flat is quite important. So we still hear the C as the root, even though it's not there. There, I've left the pedal on so that you can hear the context there. That still feels C minor. And then I would say that next chord as well, even though you could say, quite rightly, technically this is an A flat major 7 chord. Actually, the vibe of it is just still C minor. It's just that this bass note is slightly unrelated to the chord. Now, if you've kind of studied music theory before, this might be a bit strange to you to hear me talking like this, but actually I think it's really important as composers to think a bit more openly about the way that your music is working, rather than having to think, what is the function of this chord and what can I not describe it perfectly? Actually, sometimes it's really good to just improvise and say, okay, there's a chord here and then I'm playing a different note here and that creates this effect. And I think, to be honest, my guess would be that that's how Nils composes as well. It's not too much heavy on the theory. So we've got basically this C minor vibe until here, and then we get to this feeling of another chord, which is a G major chord or a G7 chord, right? And all Nils does here is he plays this without the third here. So you've got root, root, 5th, 7th, and then a first inversion here, so you get third, root, fifth, seventh, and then we're back. So C minor, G7, and then that just repeats. Now this is a really interesting moment here, and it's quite eerie because we go, right? Sorry, we go. So we're going from a G major chord to a G minor chord, and then this chord here as well. So let's just hear that through. Really important change here, right? Here you could probably see this as an A flat type of chord here, and then we get back, okay? So after those first sections, he plays just simply a, and then plays it again. And then we get to this bit here. So again, practice reducing stuff. If we reduce this down, let's take this A flat, and then this A flat, and let's put it down here, okay? So we can get rid of those. And then let's take this C, and let's put it down here. What chord do we have? We have a simple F minor chord, right? So all he's doing here is the same rhythm, but a slightly more open voicing, and that gives this like real dramaticism or dramatic moment. Because everything's kind of quite closed here. And that gives this really lovely, humble, quiet feeling. And then we get to, obviously we've got this, so sudden change in the range of the keyboard. And then we get to this bit. And this becomes this slight kind of early middle climax in the piece. And all he's doing here really is he's taking this bass note, putting up an octave, and just moving it around in the chord. And this kind of comes back to what I said a minute ago. It's like, don't think too heavily about what the chord is. Don't always compose 100% in chords. Sometimes you want to take your chord and just do interesting things to it, you know? All I'm doing here is I'm just going down the chromatic scale with my left hand in the bass and just kind of reflecting on what that does to the chord above, because bass always affects the chord above. And that's a really great compositional strategy for you to kind of like come up with ideas that aren't like chord progression, composition style of stuff. It's to add in more interests to your writing, okay? So we get this F minor chord with a ninth here, he's kind of putting a ninth in the bass. So this is the first time we've heard chord 4 of the piece, really, very clearly. We've had very clear chord 1, maybe a chord 6, not quite, and then a chord 5. So it's really just going 1 to 5 all the way through. And then when we get to this climax, new tonality or whatever you want to call it, new chord. And then chord 5. Okay, and now we go to a kind of interesting variation on this chord sequence. Now we're doing kind of a slightly different voicing up here to kind of get some high melodies, but still with the same rhythm. So this is just a C kind of root, 5th root in the left hand, and then we're outlining a C minor, but then the kind of top of your right hand can play some other notes. So that we're just going 9, 8, or D, C, C, B flat, which would be 8, 7, or 1, 7, depending how you think about it. And then the whole thing starts again and we hear this again, etc., right? And then we get to, the next time we get this F minor climax, we get an interesting bass line which is much more extended. So it goes just down the scale. right? You see what he's doing there? He's just going, which is just kind of down the C minor scale. And then we go to the chord fiver again. And the same technique's applied there as well. Obviously not that fast, I'm just rushing through it so you can see what's happening, okay? And then I would say this bit is an improvisation. At least it was an improvisation because it took me a little bit longer to learn, so there's like less clear patterns in it, right? So I think Nils is just kind of exploring the harmony here and not thinking too much about it, but let's see if we can break some of it down. Right, so it seems like one long, rambly in a good way, moment. But let's break it down. So that's a C minor chord here, still very much in C minor. 9, 10, 1 or 2, 3, 1. I should get my numbers right here. In the melody, it's a really lovely melody. Okay, so it's really just playing around the C minor chord. And this bit is exploring towards the end of that improvisation, this tension that you get when you go from the note 5 to 6 in a minor key. And then he really kind of pushes that tension out. You get this kind of the first moment that's kind of a little bit more menacing in the piece. And then he's exploring this bass line, which just goes 1, 3, 2, 4, I think. So it's... And then we just have a slower version of it to end. Really nice moment there, where instead of going and keeping the left hand down here, we go. And then this leads to this note, which is where we finish on a C minor chord. Right, let's hear that again. We want to resolve this note. Okay, and then we just have a simple C minor voicing. Again, open position, so it's kind of cold. He didn't go like this, or like this. Yeah, it's like, there's a lot of space in that chord, okay? So I hope that was useful to you. If you're interested in more content like this in future, don't forget to subscribe and comment below and let me know what you're interested in. I'll catch you soon.